Facial expressions. The face carries more emotional information than almost any other part of the body, and researchers have long noted that certain expressions appear the same across cultures, suggesting they are rooted in biology rather than upbringing. A flash of joy, disgust, or surprise tend to activate specific muscle groups in predictable patterns, which is why people can often read strong emotions on a stranger's face even without shared language. What makes facial expressions especially telling is their speed. Genuine reactions often surface for a fraction of a second before a person consciously adjusts their expression to something more socially acceptable, and that brief window is where the most honest information tends to live. Micro-expressions. These are the fleeting, almost involuntary flickers of emotion that appear on the face before a person has time to mask them. Unlike ordinary expressions, they last less than half a second and are easy to miss unless someone is specifically trained to notice them. Psychologist Paul Ekman brought this idea into wider recognition through decades of research, showing that these brief signals often reveal a feeling the person is actively trying to hide, whether out of politeness, fear, or simple habit. What sets microexpressions apart is that they are involuntary, meaning they slip past conscious control, which is why they are often used in fields like security screening and clinical psychology as a window into concealed emotion. Eye contact. The way people use their eyes during conversation says a great deal about confidence, interest, and comfort level. Sustained eye contact is often associated with attentiveness or sincerity, while a lack of it can signal shyness, distraction, or discomfort, though this varies significantly across cultures. In many Western settings, steady eye contact is read as a sign of honesty, while in some East Asian and indigenous cultures, prolonged eye contact can be viewed as disrespectful or confrontational. What makes eye contact unique among body language signals is how quickly it can shift meaning depending on context, since the same steady gaze that reads as confident in a business meeting might feel intimidating in a casual conversation. Pupil dilation. This is one of the few body language signals a person cannot consciously control, which makes it particularly reliable. When someone encounters something pleasant or emotionally engaging, their pupils tend to widen slightly, a reaction tied to the autonomic nervous system rather than deliberate choice. Early researchers in the 1960s discovered that people rated photographs with enlarged pupils as more attractive, even though most participants could not consciously identify why. What makes this signal different from most others is its complete independence from intention, since a person cannot fake or suppress it, offering a rare glimpse into a genuine internal reaction. Gaze aversion. Looking away during conversation is often mistaken as a universal sign of dishonesty, but the truth is more nuanced. People frequently glance away when they're thinking, recalling a memory, or processing a complex idea, since maintaining eye contact while concentrating can actually be mentally taxing. Gaze aversion becomes more meaningful when it appears alongside other signals, such as a sudden shift in posture or a change in vocal tone. On its own, it usually just reflects where a person's attention or cognitive effort is being directed at that particular moment, rather than any hidden motive. Eyebrow flashes. This is a brief, rapid raise of the eyebrows that lasts only a fraction of a second, often used unconsciously as a greeting or a signal of recognition. Anthropologist Irina Zabel-Eibsfeld documented this gesture across dramatically different cultures, from European villages to remote tribal communities, and found it appear with remarkable consistency, suggesting a deep evolutionary origin. People tend to flash their eyebrows when they spot a familiar face or want to signal friendly acknowledgement without speaking. What distinguishes it from other facial signals is its brevity and its almost universal cross-cultural presence, making it one of the more biologically hardwired gestures humans display. Genuine smiling, also known as a Duchenne smile, named after a French neurologist who first studied it. This type of smile involves not just the mouth, but also the muscles around the eyes, creating the familiar crinkling often called crow's feet. A polite or social smile, by contrast, tends to engage only the mouth, leaving the eyes relatively still. The muscle responsible for the eye movement, the orbicularis oculi, is difficult to activate voluntarily, which is why the genuine version is so hard to fake convincingly. This subtle difference is often what separates a warm, authentic reaction from a courteous but hollow one. Head tilting. Tilting the head to one side during conversation is widely interpreted as a sign of curiosity, engagement, or careful listening. Some researchers trace this behavior back to childhood, where tilting the head exposes a neck and can be read as a gesture of trust or openness, since it makes the person appear less defensive. It also serves a practical purpose, allowing sound to reach one ear more directly, which may explain why people instinctively tilt their heads when trying to focus on something being said. In many settings, this small movement signals that a person is genuinely absorbing what they're hearing rather than simply waiting for their turn to speak. Head nodding. A nod is one of the most recognizable gestures of agreement or encouragement, and it appears in some form across nearly every culture, though its exact meaning can shift depending on context. Rapid. Repeated nodding often signals impatience or desire for the other person to hurry along, while slow, deliberate nodding tends to convey thoughtful agreement. Interestingly, nodding can also function as a subtle form of social lubrication, encouraging a speaker to continue talking even when the listener has not verbally responded. This makes it one of the simplest yet most versatile tools people use to guide the flow of conversation without interrupting it. Nose touching. Briefly touching or rubbing the nose during conversation is sometimes associated with discomfort, uncertainty, or mild stress, though the connection to outright lying is often overstated in popular culture. One theory suggests that stress can cause tiny blood vessels in the nose to swell slightly, creating a faint itching sensation that leads to touching. This idea, sometimes called the Pinocchio effect, gained popularity through psychological studies in the 1990s, though modern researchers caution against reading too much into a single gesture. Like most body language signals, nose touching is only meaningful when it appears alongside other cues rather than as a standalone indicator. Lip compression. This happens when a person presses their lips together tightly, often without realizing it, and it is generally read as a sign of tension, disagreement, or restrained emotion. It tends to surface when someone wants to say something but chooses to hold back, whether out of politeness, uncertainty, or self-control. Because the mouth is so closely tied to speech, suppressing it in this way often reflects an internal effort to filter or withhold a reaction. Observers who notice this signal alongside a delayed or hesitant response often sense that the person is measuring their words more carefully than usual. Jaw clenching. A tightened jaw is one of the clearer physical markers of stress or suppressed frustration, since the muscles involved are closely linked to the body's fight-or-flight response. When a person feels threatened, irritated, or under pressure, the jaw often tightens involuntarily as part of a broader tension response spreading through the body. This can sometimes be accompanied by grinding of the teeth, particularly during prolonged stress. Unlike more expressive facial signals, jaw clenching is often subtle enough to go unnoticed by the person doing it, even while it remains visible to someone paying close attention. Open palm gestures. Showing the palms while speaking is one of the oldest and most consistent signals of openness and honesty across human cultures. The reasoning traces back to a practical origin, since an open palm demonstrates that a person is not holding a weapon, a gesture of non-aggression that likely predates spoken language itself. Today, people often use open palms unconsciously while explaining something truthful or making a sincere request, almost as a residual echo of that ancient signal. Politicians, negotiators, and public speakers are frequently coached to use this gesture deliberately, since audiences tend to respond to it with greater trust. Closed fist gestures. A clenched fist, particularly when used during conversation, often signals determination, frustration, or suppressed aggression. Unlike the open palm, which invites trust, a closed fist can create a subtle sense of tension or defensiveness in the person observing it. In some contexts, such as a rallying speech, a fist can be used deliberately to project strength and conviction. In more everyday settings, however, an unconscious clench of the hand often reveals a rising level of internal stress that the speaker may not even be aware of themselves. Steepling. This is a gesture of pressing the fingertips of both hands together to form a shape resembling a church steeple, and it is commonly associated with confidence and authority. Business consultants have long pointed to this gesture as a marker used by executives and professionals who feel secure in their position or knowledge. Unlike more fidgety hand movements, steepling is slow and controlled, which contributes to its association with composure. It often appears during moments when a person is about to state an opinion with conviction, functioning almost like a physical exclamation point before an important statement. Arm crossing. Folding the arms across the chest is one of the most widely recognized defensive postures, often interpreted as a sign of discomfort, disagreement, or emotional withdrawal. It can act as a barrier, whether consciously or not, shielding a vulnerable part of the body during a tense or unfamiliar situation. That said, context matters considerably, since a person might cross their arms simply because they are cold or find a comfortable resting position. The signal becomes far more meaningful when paired with other cues, such as a stiff posture or minimal eye contact, which together paint a clearer picture of genuine unease. Self-touch, also known as self-soothing behavior. This includes small unconscious actions like stroking one's own arm, touching the neck, or holding one's own hand. These gestures often emerge during moments of anxiety or emotional discomfort, serving as a subtle form of comfort the person provides to themselves. The behavior is thought to have roots in early childhood, when physical touch from a caregiver reliably eased distress, leaving behind a pattern that resurfaces in adulthood during stressful situations. Because this signal is so deeply automatic, it often appears even when a person is otherwise successfully masking their emotions through facial expression or tone of voice. Hand wringing. Rubbing or twisting the hand together is a common physical marker of nervousness or internal conflict, often surfacing in situations involving uncertainty or anticipated bad news. The repetitive motion seems to provide a small physical outlet for pent-up energy, similar to pacing or tapping a foot. It tends to intensify as stress builds, making a fairly reliable real-time indicator of how a person's emotional state is shifting during a conversation. Observers who notice increasing hand wringing, especially paired with shallow breathing, are often witnessing a person working through genuine internal tension. Leg crossing. The way a person positions their legs while seated can reveal quite a bit about their comfort level with the people around them. Crossing the legs towards someone is generally seen as an inviting or engaged posture, while crossing them away can suggest disinterest or a subtle desire for distance. This is closely tied to a broader body language principle, in which people often orient themselves physically toward what interests them and away from what does not. Because leg positioning is largely unconscious, it can reveal underlying feelings even when a person's facial expression and words suggest otherwise. Foot direction. Feet are often described by body language researchers as the most honest part of the body, largely because people rarely think to control them consciously. During conversation, feet frequently point toward the direction a person's attention or interest actually lies, whether toward an exit, a person they find more engaging, or simply the shortest path out of an uncomfortable situation. This makes foot direction a particularly useful signal in group settings, where a person's face might remain polite and neutral even as their feet quietly reveal where they would rather be. Because this behavior sits so far outside conscious awareness, it tends to be remarkably consistent and hard to fake. Mirroring. This refers to the tendency of people to unconsciously copy the posture, gestures, or speech patterns of someone they feel connected to or want to build rapport with. It often happens automatically during friendly conversations, with both parties gradually adopting similar body positions without realizing it. Researchers in social psychology have linked this behavior to empathy and social bonding, noting that mirroring tends to increase naturally as trust and comfort grow between two people. Because of this connection, some negotiators and salespeople deliberately mirror the person they're speaking with, using it as a subtle tool to build a sense of familiarity and ease. Open posture. Sitting or standing with the body facing another person, with limbs relaxed and uncrossed, generally signals comfort, confidence, and a willingness to engage. This posture leaves the torso exposed, which on a subconscious level communicates a lack of perceived threat from the surrounding environment. People naturally adopt more open postures around those they trust, and tend to close off physically when they feel uncertain or unsafe. In professional settings, an open posture is often associated with approachability, which is why many communication trainers encourage speakers to consciously maintain it during important conversations. Expansive posture. Sometimes referred to as a power pose, this involves making the body appear larger by widening the stance, spreading the arms, or standing with hands on the hips. This kind of posture is deeply rooted in the animal kingdom, where many species instinctively expand their size to project dominance or confidence during a confrontation. Humans display a similar pattern, often unconsciously taking up more space when they feel assured or are trying to assert authority. Interestingly, some psychological research suggests that adopting this posture, even briefly and without any real change in circumstance, can shift a person's own internal sense of confidence. Shrinking posture. the opposite of an expansive stance. This involves making the body smaller through hunched shoulders, a lower head, or arms held close to the torso. It often appears during moments of anxiety, submission, or a desire to avoid drawing attention. This instinct likely traces back to survival behavior, where appearing smaller and less threatening can help avoid conflict in a dangerous situation. In modern settings, this posture frequently surfaces in people who feel out of place, overwhelmed, or unsure themselves, make it one of the more visible signs of low confidence in a given moment. Proxemics. This term refers to the way people use physical space and distance during interaction, a concept formally introduced by anthropologist Edward Hall in the 1960s. Hall identified distinct zones, ranging from intimate space reserved for close relationships to public space used for larger gatherings, and found that comfortable distances vary significantly by culture. What one culture considers a normal conversational distance might feel intrusively close or oddly distant in another. Because personal space preferences are so deeply ingrained, violations of them often produce an immediate, almost involuntary sense of discomfort, even when the person cannot articulate exactly why they feel uneasy. Territorial displays. These are behaviors people use to claim or defend physical space, such as spreading belongings across a table, resting an arm on the back of an adjacent chair, or placing feet up in a way that occupies more room. Such displays are often linked to a sense of ownership or status within a given environment, whether in an office, a classroom, or a shared living space. Interestingly, the amount of space a person claims often correlates with their perceived confidence or authority in that setting. Someone who feels secure in their position tends to take up noticeably more room than someone who feels like a guest or an outsider. Haptics. This is a study of communication through touch, one of the earliest and most fundamental forms of human connection. A handshake, a pat on the back, or a hand placed gently on someone's shoulder all carry meaning that varies depending on the relationship, culture, and context involved. Touch has a measurable physiological effect, often lowering stress hormones and increasing feelings of trust between people, which is part of why a warm handshake can leave such a lasting impression. At the same time, touch is one of the most culturally sensitive body language categories, since norms around who may touch whom and in what way differ enormously around the world. Gait, the way a person walks, can reveal a surprising amount about their emotional state, even from a distance. A brisk, purposeful stride often suggests confidence or urgency, while a slow, shuffling walk can indicate fatigue, sadness, or hesitation. Researchers studying movement patterns have found that people can often identify emotions like anger or joy just by observing someone's walking style, without seeing their face at all. Because gait involves the whole body working in coordination, it tends to be difficult to consciously disguise for long periods, making it a fairly honest, if often overlooked, form of nonverbal communication. Paralanguage. This refers to the vocal elements that accompany speech but exist outside the actual words being spoken, including tone, pitch, pace, and volume. The same sentence can carry entirely different meanings depending on how it is delivered, which is why sarcasm, sincerity, and hesitation are often communicated more through paralanguage than through vocabulary itself. A rising pitch at the end of a statement, for instance, can turn a confident claim into something that sounds more like question. Because listeners process these vocal cues almost instantly and often unconsciously, paralanguage plays a major role in shaping how trustworthy or convincing a speaker appears. Blocking behaviors. These are small, often unconscious actions where a person places an object or even their own hand between themselves and someone else, creating a physical barrier. This might look like holding a coffee cup close to the chest, placing a bag on a table between two people, or angling a laptop screen slightly outward during a meeting. Such gestures tend to emerge when a person feels a degree of vulnerability or discomfort, even if the conversation itself remains calm on the surface. Because blocking behaviors are so subtle, they often go unnoticed consciously, yet they can quietly shift the emotional tone of an interaction. Adaptors. This category covers small, repetitive self-soothing habits that surface during stress, such as tapping a pen, twirling hair, or fidgeting with a ring. These behaviors are believed to originate from learned coping mechanisms developed over a lifetime, often without any deliberate intention behind them. Unlike gestures used to communicate a specific message, adapters exist mainly to help the person manage their own internal state rather than to convey anything to others. because they tend to increase noticeably under pressure. A sudden rise in adapter behavior is often one of the clearest visible signs that someone's stress level is climbing. Illustrators. These are the natural hand and arm movements people use while speaking to emphasize or visually support what they're saying, such as gesturing to indicate size, direction, or sequence. Unlike adapters, illustrators are directly tied to the content of speech and tend to increase when a person feels passionate or deeply engaged with their topic. Interestingly, research has shown that restricting a person's ability to gesture while speaking can actually make it harder for them to find the right words, suggesting these movements support thought itself, not just communication. This close link between gesture and cognition is part of why animated speakers often seem more energetic and easier to follow. Emblems. These are gestures with specific, culturally understood meaning that can stand entirely for spoken words, such as a thumbs up, a wave, or a nod. Unlike more universal expressions like a genuine smile, emblems are learned through culture and can vary dramatically or even carry opposite meanings from one region to another. A gesture considered friendly and affirming in one country might be viewed as rude or offensive elsewhere, making emblems one of the more culturally risky categories of body language to rely on when traveling. Because they are deliberate and learned, emblems are also the easiest type of body language for a person to consciously control or disguise.